Hello, everyone, and welcome back for another edition of StreamTime Sports. I'm your host, Nick Meacham, CEO here at SportsPro. And today I'm being joined by editor of SportsPro, Steve McCaskill, to talk all things that are happening across the sports media landscape. And my gosh, there's been some big things happening of late, not just the media summit a couple of weeks ago as we're recording this, but also some big news happening across Europe. So, Steve, again, welcome back to the show.
No, it was good to be on here, Nick.
Let's dig into the first one, which was a hot topic at the media summit, was what the heck's happening with UEFA and the Champions League rights and all the European football stuff going on, and the fact that Relevant Sports is now leading their first tender on behalf of UEFA after securing that responsibility from team after, what was it, 25 odd years? I think we talked about this at the time when it happened. So a little company by the name of Paramount's popped up out of relatively nowhere and really sort of shaken up the landscape across a whole host of different markets. Just talk us through what's some of the key outcomes that have eventuated off the back of this rights cycle, at least to date anyway.
Yeah, so we've been kind of across this since the decision was made to go with Relevant rather than Team, and we're hearing snippets of information, and even in Madrid, and even so, this took us all by surprise. My phone went off literally as I was on the air bridge going on the plane back to London, and it emerged that Paramount had won the majority of the Champions League rights in the UK. It's also done the same in Germany, with Amazon having first pick matches in both those countries. It's also got first pick games in Italy, although it's Paramount's not won the rights there. They're still with Sky, and it's the UK one that's taken the headlines just because it's completely taken everyone. It's come out of nowhere basically. Paramount, it does have interest in the UK. It has some pay TV channels. It has Paramount Plus, although that's bundled with Sky at present. It's not really I wouldn't say it's a mainstream streaming service in the UK. I'd say most people probably do get it as part of their Sky Cinema subscription. It has Channel 5, and it has Pluto TV, so that's its interest. So the fact it was Paramount was a surprise, and then I think the money involved is also not necessarily taken people by surprise, because I think everyone was expecting an increase. The Champions League has done very well recently, but it represents quite a big increase in the combined deals with between Amazon, Paramount, and Sky, so interesting. Sky is back in the fray. It's got Europa League and Conference League rights. Those have been unbundled. It's £2.2 billion over 4 years is what we understand. So it's the scale of that fee. It's the fact Paramount's come out of nowhere. Essentially, I think there's a lot of discussion now about what consumer propositions are going to look like in 8 to 18 months. But yeah, we had no idea that Paramount was coming. I think we thought TNT would go back in for it, given it's arguably their marquee property. At least it's their USP in the UK. So yeah, exciting times, but I didn't have a clue this was coming.
Now, Paramount's a really funny one at the moment to watch and follow. Obviously, they've been acquired and been involved with some pretty major international rumors, as well as an acquisition itself, but and also came into the market and mopped up the UFC rights, which was obviously a really big move for them in the US. Now to see them spread their wings outside of the US and make a move like this, Paramount's always been an enigma for me, and I'm curious to see whether now that they have these rights, how they also do lean into those free-to-air channels that they have. Will Channel 5 get any access and have games available free-to-air, or will they all be stuck behind the paywall? Do you have any feel on either what they're going to do or what you think they should do?
At the moment, I think Paramount Plus, I think it's something like $4.99 a month in the UK. It might be a bit more than that. But again, like I said, most people, they do have a bundling agreement with Sky. So I'm a Sky Cinema subscriber. I get Paramount Plus as part of that. I think it's obviously going to cost more when the Champions League comes. I think how much it'll be, I don't really know, but I think it'll probably be more affordable than TNT Sports is on Discovery Plus, quite simply because they don't have all those rights to pay for. TNT Sports is positioned as, because it's a pure play sports provider as part of the Discovery Plus package of content. Paramount Plus at the moment, if it's just the Champions League, would basically be an entertainment proposition with Champions League thrown in. So a little bit like how Disney has the Women's Champions League. That it's more it's more sport for their subscribers rather than being a sports service for sport's sake. So I think it will cost more, but I think it'll be more affordable. But obviously, you're just getting one property unless Paramount decide to go for more. In terms of the free-to-air component, I think that really depends what's been said behind closed doors. I haven't been able to find out anything on this, whether they decide Channel 5 is a good shop window for this, or if it will stop people subscribing. I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of games on Channel 5. I think the final, possibly.
That would make a lot of sense.
That would make sense in terms of getting advertising revenue. So I don't think the final itself is going to be a major subscription driver. Why not get a big audience for Channel 5, get the advertising, and then, as a promotional tool for the following season. So there is that element to it. But of course, I think, we've talked about Paramount being an enigma. I think the biggest question mark is what happens with Paramount and Warner Brothers Discovery, whether if that merger happens, does anything change? I mean, maybe all that happens is you have this combined Paramount HBO mega streaming service that costs more than what it costs now to watch.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. Why I call them enigma, I guess, is that they've also done some weird moves up until this point, like sponsoring F1 and having their branding on various races and try to get shirt sponsorship. And
It's Milan.
Yeah. I'm just like, not really. How is that investment? There's such an efficiency required in driving subscriptions, and that is a great needle mover to get visibility. But is that turning into anything really for someone who's running a platform like that, particularly when you don't have any F1 rights of significance in the key markets that you're going to be visible in? I found it a bit weird, but anyway, that's interesting. And obviously, that whole conversation around Warner Brothers Discovery and Paramount is a real funny one, because let's just say hypothetically that deal does happen. That means that Paramount's probably paid way more than they needed to for the rights for something that they would have got anyway as part of that deal if they just kept calm and carried on. So maybe in the grand scheme of things, it just doesn't move the needle for what could be a pretty big, juicy multi-billion dollar deal if that was to play out.
I guess you've got to pursue an independent strategy no matter what, I think, is the other thing. We also have no idea how that process is going to play out. Paramount do want to take the entirety of WD, but equally WD could be sold to Netflix or to Comcast. Although, to be honest, I'm contradicting myself there, because I think the TNT Sports in the UK would be part of the Netflix and Comcast deals, based on what I understand from how that if WD splits. So yeah, it's all there's so many layers to this, and I don't know if we're in danger of overthinking it by what could happen a few years down the line. But for now, I think it just Paramount Plus. It's quite obviously it wants to expand its presence in Europe. We're seeing lots of streamers. They need this global scale to make the sums work. And if you don't have that footprint on the ground in Europe, are you going to be able to make it work? And nothing's more effective than getting people to sign up for your service than sport.
Yeah, absolutely. So it makes a lot of sense for Paramount if they want to make some waves, get into the market, get some instant eyeballs and audience. The Sky is the other interesting part. Oh, before I jump into Sky, I will say that the value's gone up, which I think it will get a lot of people's excited perhaps in the industry. Media rights are back, baby. Let's see that these revenues fly through the roof and never expect everyone to start spending more. Now, a couple of things I think in context, I'd be interested to get your take on this, is firstly, I believe there's more games now available for this cycle than there were previously because of Collective Conference League and Europa League and the new format than last cycle. Is that correct?
I think it's the same.
Yeah. Okay. Damn it. That's one theory already busted. So if the value of that has gone up the way it has, is it as simple as just Paramount has really overspent to make sure they secured those rights, or do we really think that other players at like Amazon have put more money on the table, given, let's be honest, the flattening of the rest of the market, particularly across football? Why is there been such a bump otherwise?
I'm going to give you a bit of credit for your first argument, even though there's no more games. I think this current cycle has proved the benefits of increasing that volume and increasing. Thanks
for giving me credit, Steve, but that's a good point.
I mean,
your point's better than my point. Mine's just, there's more games, therefore you're going to pay more. But yours is actually, they've proven themselves, which I think is probably a good shout.
if it makes you feel any better, I was trying to do the sums and I couldn't work out where all the games are coming from, and I realised that the deal includes qualifiers, so that was what I
Okay.
was doing. Yeah, but I think the changes to the format have been a huge success. You're seeing there's more regular games, so instead of there being 6 game weeks, there are now 8. So that's basically live football every other week for from between the start of the season and Christmas. It's a lot more regular. You're also seeing more matches between the bigger teams. So yes, you can argue that there might not be as much jeopardy, but it's almost like test matches in rugby. I feel like it's they're not life or death, but they are competitive. People do like to see it. You saw last night as we're recording this, Arsenal playing Bayern Munich. Not much was on the line for either, apart from laying down a marker, I suppose. So I think people are more interested in it. I think people like Amazon getting involved, certainly in Germany, Italy, and the UK, has elevated the prestige of the competition, which I think was playing a little bit before in the UK. Don't know what I can't speak to the rest of Europe. So I think that is one factor. It's become a bit more prestigious. It's almost become Super League light, and I think that has resonated with broadcasters. And then you look at the other games with the conference and the Europa League, that's also increased in inventory. Inventory is hugely important now. Before we'll talk about Sky in a second, but I certainly think that's been a factor there. So I think it's a combination of obviously Paramount's bid quite a lot for this. We don't have that specific breakdown. So you've got that competitive pressure, but then you've also got just, I guess, an increase in perceived value of these rights. And if you're saying, your media rights are back, baby, I think this could be a zero-sum game in some markets in terms of maybe prioritizing Champions League over domestic league rights is a potential knock-on effect. Something we'll talk about something else as well later. But just as I'm not saying this is exact cause, but Canal Plus in France, as that's retained the Champions League rights in France, but there's obviously other reasons why it's not gone with Ligue 1, but it could be a factor. Like maybe we have Champions League where the best French players are playing. We've got leading clubs. So yeah, I think the Champions League is probably the biggest growth property on this side of the Atlantic, and I think it's just reflected in these sums.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. From what I've been hearing around the traps, there is a lot of frustration and concern about how much of UEFA is basically eating the pie of the big European leagues because of this expanded approach with more games happening that are appealing to the local audiences. Is the amount of money that broadcasters have to spend in most cases is budgeted and finite, so that money is just being shifted from one place to another rather than definitively expanding the total pot that all clubs get. Time will tell, but it feels definitely like that's a viable outcome or an impact of what's been going on. Let's talk about Sky. Sky has come back into the fore with European football. They lost those last cycle, or the cycle before, I think, if I remember correctly.
2015 was the last time they had Champions League, so that's the last time they did UEFA games.
A long time. They come back in, and now they've got a huge amount of games. I mean, they've got there's 1,500 live football matches they now have available through their channels through the course of a season, which is just an extraordinary amount. Basically, games, live matches every single day of the year. So if you love football, it's definitely the place to be. They've obviously doubled down on the value of football that it has to their platform. In fact, neglected a lot of others, I think, along the way in many instances as a result of that commitment to football. Did it surprise that they came back in for this, or do you think it gives them that solid market share and stranglehold of, if you're a football fan in the UK, you have to be a subscriber to Sky? There's no questions asked.
Yeah, I was surprised they came back to it, but it makes a bit of sense the more I think about it now. The reason Sky went for the Champions League, I think it was back in 2003, was because they did have the UEFA Cup before that, but they saw that wasn't really shifting the needle, and that's why they went for the Champions League. They went all in. Of course, they've decided somewhere along the way that it's not worth spending that money on the Champions League because it's probably not going to add many more subscriptions versus what they've got with the Premier League. So that's their strategy there. But what the acquiring the Conference League and the Europa League does, it gives, again, it's more about inventory. They can flood Sky Sports Plus with with live games. It probably, again, we haven't seen the breakdown, so I'll be waiting on that. I've been trying to find this out myself, but it probably wasn't. It's not obviously not going to be as high to get the Europa League as much as it would do the Champions League. So it's probably lower cost to that. There's also the fact that the Premier League, you have an increasing number of competitive teams in the Premier League, and only 4 are guaranteed. You might get 1 or 2 others, as in this season, can get in there through other means, such as England's coefficient and Spurs winning the Europa League. So there's going to be some big teams dropping down into the Europa League. So that increases the value again. That increases the value to Sky. And then, I think being able to say we've got football every day of the week, that's going to be a great marketing hook, isn't it? And makes me wonder, what else they might do. I think it's probably just about done now in terms of what they might want to add. I do wonder if they might go for UEFA qualifiers just to fill that out. And so even when I know they have League One and League Two during international breaks, but they can, and WSL, but maybe they include in that. So it comes into that. They've clearly prioritized football. They've prioritized some other sports that have audiences to bring subscribers. So golf, Formula One, tennis is especially popular with female viewers, for example. So, but football's number one. This is more football content. It probably wasn't as much as they would have. Well, definitely wasn't as much. Probably wasn't that much in the grand scheme of things to get it on the platform. And it means they're not missing out midweek anymore.
So looking further afield across Europe, some interesting just developments in certain markets. A couple of the major ones here. Spain looks business as usual. I believe Telefónica's held on to those rights. You've got Italy, business as usual. Sky, the majority of stuff, and then Prime keep their Wednesday first pick. France, as you said, Canal Plus, hold on there. UK we've covered, and then Germany is an interesting one. I think that's let's talk a little bit about that one. Obviously, there's been quite a bit of shuffling and then some change there with our RTL, who's been the long-standing holder of the Europa League and the Conference League. Now lose that to DAZN, but then DAZN have lost a bunch of Champions League, and now Prime Video's gone from first pick Tuesday to first pick Wednesday, and Paramount's got the lion's share of the good stuff for Champions League, a bit like they do in the UK. Does that sound about right? Have I missed anything?
It does, and if you are confused, there's a handy table on our coverage on SportsPro.com with all these deals. So Germany basically mirrors the UK. You've got the free-to-air headlines on ZDF, which the BBC have in the UK. DAZN has got the Europa Conference League rights, just like Sky has in the UK. Paramount Plus is now the senior rights holder, and then you've got Amazon with the first pick game. So Germany's a little bit different to the UK in that it's, again, I think we mentioned this a few times on the pod, it's never been a traditionally large pay TV market. It is slowly going that way just because of, I think, just in terms of international forces as anything. So I think they've decided that, again, the best value they're going to get is by splitting those across multiple broadcasters. There's plenty of people who want a slice of it, perhaps don't have the money to pay for everything. I'm sure UEFA are very happy that Paramount have decided to come in that market. Interestingly, Netflix were close in Germany, from what we hear. So they had a very competitive bid, but were pipped by Paramount. And off the top of my head, I think Paramount tried for another couple of markets as well, but were ultimately unsuccessful. Perhaps because it could be finances could be one thing, but maybe UEFA was also concerned about handing over to a streamer in a certain market in terms of getting to end consumers. But in Germany, it hasn't had that issue. Partly, I think, because DAZN has been so successful, or rather in terms of normalizing streaming and having that route to market. Interesting that UK and Germany one side, unbundling, splitting it across different broadcasters. France, Italy, and Spain, not quite status quo, but very, very similar. Trying to keep it together as much as possible.
Now, it would be, to your point about Netflix, if that is true, would be a pretty big step change from their current approach, being very event-based. I could have seen them maybe go for the first pick Wednesday night, Tuesday night, part of their package, because that's a bit event style, which kind of aligns with Netflix's mandate and what they do with maybe the WWE having the Monday Night Raw, if I remember correctly. as part of their mix. But otherwise, they've been very clear, even in recent calls, they're still focused on non-seasonal rights packages that they want to buy. So things that can move the needle on an event or a one-off type of basis. So it would be interesting to see if they were seriously that close to buying those rights, because that would have been meant a bit of a step change from that message. Now, we're going to move the conversation on to DAZN in a second. And I think looking at what's happened in Germany, given they have now lost the Champions League rights they had available in that market, and now they only have Europa and Conference League, given Germany's presence in the Champions League, particularly with Bayern and its other top teams, would be a bit of a blow for DAZN, at least from a audience perspective. No idea. What I don't really understand is, the fact that the net revenues have gone up. How much of that portion of revenue is coming from now? Has the proportions changed from Europa League and Conference League in the mix against the Champions League? Now, does that make sense? So basically, is that making a bigger share of the pie than it did before, because it's proved itself, like you were saying earlier? That would be interesting to know, because if DAZN has downgraded their approach there, but still feel like they've got a good proposition for their audience because of the strength of the Bundesliga's teams in Europe, then that might still be okay for them, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's partly that. I think again, you're going to get, you're missing out on having Bayern Munich, and you're missing out on having Borussia Dortmund or something like that. But the German teams, again, could be a case of they could argue more competitive in the Europa League and the Conference League. I think cost, yes, is probably a factor. And if you are looking to, it could be that they were priced out effectively, or they decided it wasn't worth it. And if they have got Bundesliga rights, they might. I think if we're looking, I think we can almost call it a big four now. I know we've called it a big five European leagues, but in terms of definitely in terms of media deals, for obvious reasons, you need to have domestic league just to be, just to be in the conversation. So we've talked about TNT Sports in the UK. The Champions League is their USP, but they need Premier League just to have their foot in the door there. DAZN has that. They've been quite serious about getting that. So they might have to come to the same conclusion, that they just don't. It wasn't worth the outlay in terms of how they were going to get subscribers. And this way, the Europa League and Conference League, give them that midweek football, give them that inventory, and ensure they can still show some games involving German clubs. So I think it will be very interesting to see the relative, how much those Conference League and Europa League rights are valued within those deals, what value they give to them. That's something, again, I'm really trying to find out, and I'm really interested in see how they are valued in relation to the Champions League.
Yeah, I'd be super fascinated to see if that has changed and have it improved, because I feel like it does make a lot of sense if now there's that validation of the product, that more would be interested in following Europe because of that jeopardy that comes with each and every match once you get past the round robin stages. But as I mentioned, we're talking about DAZN, so they've decreased their investment into Germany significantly with this announcement. There's no question of that. They have obviously pulled out of France. We've covered that at length on Ligue 1, and you're going to hear more about that in the coming weeks when we have Ben Morel, who's the former LFP chief exec, on the podcast, which was recorded at the Media Summit. But now there's a news. I heard about this a couple of times at the Media Summit, but did not expect it to be the next couple of days later to be hitting the airways. But that's probably why I started to hear about it then, was that DAZN have now forced their way out of the Belgian Pro League relationship they had. Huge news, because all of a sudden it goes from the outlier that was the French situation to now Belgium, now Germany's reduction on the European side. Rumors that in Australia there might be some movement with their investment into Foxtel of stepping away from the AFL, which would be massive.
Struth.
Well, good work. I was going to say blimey, but Struth's even better, actually. That would be huge repercussions for the marketplace. And I looked online a little bit about that stuff in Australia, I should say, and there is a lot of negative sentiment around DAZN coming into that market and just what Foxtel are doing in that market. So more than I expected. I kind of thought that Foxtel's position was going to be a lot more positive energy, and I want to come back to the brand stuff in a second. But my point here is that it seems like DAZN is really sort of reining things back now in a few different key markets, particularly around football. And this Belgian thing, I think, is super interesting, because where does the Belgian league go from here, and where does DAZN go from here? So what's your view on them pulling out of the Belgian Pro League? Did you hear much about this before it happened, or was it a bit of a surprise?
No, like you, I've been hearing murmurs of this for a couple of months. I didn't realize it was going to be coming to a head so soon, though. I mean, it is a bit mystifying in terms of you sign that deal and then you withdraw from it. Basically, I think that's both France and Belgium. There's already inklings within the first 6 months of the deal coming to effect. So DAZN's previous deal, I believe, was inherited from 11 Sports. And this current deal was significantly less than the previous agreement that it inherited. And it's just, when you are a rights owner, the whole nature of that relationship is that you take on, you give guarantees, you then take on the risk, and you hope to monetize it and acquire subscribers. It's just interesting. It's happened now twice in 2 different markets, and in both instances, distribution appears to have had a big impact on it. So in France, as far as I can recall, I think a kind of Canal Plus was a challenge in terms of carriage. I could be misremembering that. We'll have to double check that.
They haven't got a Canal Plus relationship and distribution at all currently.
Yeah. And then, of course, in Belgium, they also failed to get carriage deals with the incumbent telcos. So that's basically why it's come to a head. Piracy has also been mentioned in France, especially. But as you say, it's interesting that they are scaling back in some markets, or being very careful in terms of what they're investing. The zone, we've seen it. We're almost like in the third act of the zone. We had the disruptor stage, we had the consolidation stage, and now we have the platform stage. And it's working and becoming profitable. A lot of money has been sunk into that venture. There was talk of an IPO a couple of years ago. It feels like they are now moving towards that, and it's a bit like when Spotify was going through its IPO. It spent months trying to sort out its deal, years even trying to sort out its relationships with the major labels. It feels like that's a similar thing happening with DAZN. It wants to make sure that the deal it has are going to put it in a as favorable position, if and when it goes to the market. We've also discussed how it's trying to become a platform, how it's shifting towards becoming an aggregator or distributor of third-party content, with its own first-party deals out alongside that, and them working together. So it's basically taking the view that if the sums aren't working, if we feel like the market conditions aren't right, then
I think it's super interesting to that carriage thing. I think is just the carriage distribution component of this is the most interesting thing. Who would have thought that the telcos are really the ones in the power play impacting the media rights market so much? But obviously the significance of their role there is massive, because they have, let's say, keys to the audience. And if they're not willing to open up those doors for whatever reason, because the deal's not appropriate or what have you, then it is a rock and a hard place. I remember something similar. Was it with 11 and UFC in the UK? Was one of the first times I remember, going back a decade or so ago now, when they were trying to launch something in the UK and they couldn't get a carriage deal with anyone. So they basically had to give up on that playbook before it even got started.
Yes, they won the rights from then BT, and you're right, they couldn't get. I don't think they secured any distribution in the UK. So yeah, as you say, there are gatekeepers still to the market. We talk about the pay TV platforms having, or loosening their power, which is why you see, Sky in the UK probably being one of the better examples of trying to become an aggregator and maintain those customer relationships itself. I don't have a lot of in-depth knowledge of the Belgian market, but in France, the pay TV market now is very IP based, which means these telcos have even greater power. It could be similar in Belgium. One of the big telcos there is Orange. So that requires some of the more specialist knowledge than me. But again, if it is the case, if it is IPTV, it's just as crucial factor as it is in France, then they're going to have a lot of power.
I mean, the challenge I think for Belgium, who knows where they go from here? Can someone come in and fill the void? Will they have to do a Ligue 1? Because that would just put the whole league back again. You'd see it'd be deja vu all over again in that instance if that was the case. Do you think there's anyone viable to step in and actually take on that responsibility and maybe put the money on the table for that relationship?
I mean, short of going back to the previous incumbents, I'm not sure what their options are. We talked about the Champions League taking money away from domestic league. Money we might have been previously allocated for domestic leagues. Is there someone with the money? Is there someone the inclination? Is there someone that thinks Belgian Pro League is going to shift that needle? And what is, with all respect to the Belgian league, it is a secondary league in Europe. Is that going to push the needle in the same way? And if the telcos are deciding that they don't need those rights to shift their wares anymore, 15 years ago, the telcos were all buying rights because they saw it as a way to sell communication services. We've moved away from that. The market is now, it's not a case of, you don't have telcos buying rights at a loss to subsidize the rest of their business because they don't need to do it anymore. It's now shifted towards the streamers. So I don't really know. Again, knowledge of Belgium is limited in terms of the media landscape, but it does feel like this is, it's a huge problem. And just based on the footballing knowledge of the two countries, there's been a massive impact on French club finances, but France has industrial talent development conveyor belt. So player sales are one way they can make up the shortfall. Obviously, it's a larger country for a D2C service. It's not great. That might be an understatement, but there are things they can use to mitigate it. In Belgium, I'm not really sure. I mean, it could lead to club bankruptcies if no one comes in.
Yeah, it could be that significant. And then you look at from the other side of this and look at DAZN, and we've kind of been talking about it a little bit here, but they've pulled out of Belgium. Let's see the Belgian Pro League can get some money out of them along the way as well. You've got the front situation, you've got the Australian situation. Yeah, it does feel like they're either setting up for the IPO that they've been talking about for a long time ago. Their CEO has been adamant that they are going to be profitable next year. Well, yeah, if you pull out all the loss-making stuff that they've got, that's probably going to help. And that's what they seems to be doing right now. Other than that, the only thing I could think of is that they also want to set up for someone to buy them. And again, I really can't think of anyone else that would be viable to do that as a standalone, other than, say, a Paramount, basically, given their moves they're making in trying to be more of a global streaming player. I can't see Netflix making an investment, although they keep getting rumored with Warner Brothers Discovery, because maybe for the content arm of the Warner Brothers Discovery business, but I can't really see anyone else coming in for making that sort of defined all-in move. So do you think that's the play here? Is there anything else that I'm missing? And secondly, is there any other markets that you think could be worth following or watching that there could be some further ramifications or further changes made, particularly from the DAZN side?
Well, I mean, on the first side, DAZN being bought, I mean, yeah, there probably are a couple of streamers that might be interested, I think. And if DAZN thinks that it can shift towards more global deals or global distribution deals, then it might become more attractive. So, if you're, let's use, we have no information on this. Let's use Paramount as a hypothetical example. You get distribution for NFL Game Pass for NHL. You get rights in certain countries. As in Paramount and DAZN in Australia, there'll be obvious, for term synergies there in that market. So it's not out of the question that someone could buy them. But I think someone like Netflix, it's just too messy.
Yeah,
you don't want to get involved in it. You'd have to get all. This is a company that has very limited sports rights. It has a small team negotiating them. They've all been very clean deals so far. It's not not getting embedded in it. So I think who buys them? Yeah, I'm not really sure who, but it's not out of the question. In terms of other countries, not really got any inklings of what could be next, but I think the market is getting very difficult for these leagues underneath the big four in France. There's a couple that are probably all right. I think the Netherlands and Portugal, for example, I think they're probably okay. But if you look underneath that, and you look at the leagues that have been reliant on those broadcast deals, they are going to have a period of adjustment if that demand suddenly dissipates. I mean, I could pick up Switzerland. Switzerland, I think, has never really had that, so it's probably all right. There's always been pay TV elements, but Switzerland hasn't. It's never had ambitions to be bigger than what it is. I say, and there's lots of competition from the major leagues. So I think leagues like that might be all right. But yeah, I'm looking at the middle. I think is probably the one that I'd be more concerned about.
Seems to be a lot of change expected there. And for DAZN as a business, whatever they're doing now, if it's just getting themselves into profitability, they also need to find some other additional revenue streams, because taking a standalone subscription approach clearly in this day and age is not working. They have added some advertising layers to it, but I can't see that as a needle mover enough for them to really get the returns that others are really leaning into through advertising as an alternative supplement to the subscription business. So I have no idea where what the future holds for someone like a DAZN. I mean, you spoke to their CTO at the Media Summit. Obviously, the Club World Cup was a big thing, a big project,
Right.
A big expense, a big investment in different ways, shapes, and forms. What did you get any sense from that conversation as to how impactful, positively or negatively, the Club World Cup was? I'm sure it was all positive and all rainbows.
I mean, I think the Club World Cup was an effective proof of concept for DAZN rather than how do I put this? They are happy with how they say they're happy with how it performed in terms of viewership and in terms of subscription, or at least not even subscription drivers, but in terms of getting people signed up from registrations. I think what they would be happy is that they claim they can now support 300 million users around the world concurrently. So if you are a global property, you're probably never going to get close to that.
300 million in concurrence.
That's what they said in testing with the various cloud providers, which again in Madrid they did provide a technical overview of how they achieved that in testing. But for reference, I mean that's a Super Bowl. So you in practice you're probably not going to get anywhere near that. So I think the fact they'd be able to at least show these stress tests means that if you are a property with that wants to reach every country in the world, they now say they can do this for you, which I think is probably more of a distribution play than a rights play. I don't think anyone is to be too bothered about that. So, and we also spoke about we're talking about diversifying those revenue streams, moving away from subscriptions into other areas. This platform has got to support ticketing, it's got to support betting, it's got to support e-commerce. I think that's what they're trying to do at the foundation for. They're trying to what we discussed was basically them putting into practice what they've been saying for a few years now, becoming this platform for sport, becoming more than just a pure play subscription provider, which that's the technological element. We've touched upon perhaps the business side of things in terms of where they think they're going on that and how they are restructuring their business to adjust to that future. So it's explained, it was quite technical, which I think was given the room that we have in Madrid, was absolutely fine, and it was very insightful in terms of, I think it was interesting to see how you used to organize yourself in terms of how you manage all those different feeds in different languages, which again is another thing. I think it's hundreds of feeds for each game in the Club World Cup, which it shouldn't be sniffed at. That is it. I know we've been a bit sniffy about Club World Cup in terms of sporting perspective and also how it came to be.
I haven't been, Steve. I haven't been.
I mean, I watched 10 minutes of it, and ironically, I watched it on DAZN in Belgium.
There you go.
Yeah. So I think I watched Flamengo. I think it was. Well, Flamengo, I can't remember anymore. But I wanted to see how it was playing out, but couldn't get English commentary. It's hundreds of feeds. You got to power all these different immersive experiences, which are also going to take bandwidth and production capabilities. And there probably isn't anything more, I guess, high profile to do that than a major international competition. And even though I'm scoffing at it, maybe not you, Nick, it still had quite, it was still widely watched around the world. It obviously is not close to an actual international team World Cup, but it's not insignificant. So I think that's probably what DAZN see it as. They see it as a proof of concept. They see it as a relationship builder. And yeah, Sonny Tiga was just able to share some technical insight, which again, based on I saw him having conversations outside the room. I was trying to get him to do an interview for us on SportsPro. So it was clearly resonated with the audience, and lots of people very interested to hear about it.
I mean, I think that their technical side is probably just as interesting as anything else, because the scale of what they're trying to do, the fact that they've integrated these direct-to-consumer platforms like the NFL Game Pass into the platform has been a super interesting journey. Added betting, etc., to the platform. No idea if that's performed, but just taking all these little keep adding more things to the mix. It must have been a CTO job would be a heck of a job in a business like that.
One of the most interesting things about DAZN is that they're creating this service layer for these third parties. DAZN say it's plug and play, so you can put it. If you're the NFL, you're the NHL, you put your content on there. It can be overlaid onto this, and you benefit from that technological. I guess the development capabilities they have there. So that is very impressive. I mean, the DAZN is very impressive from a technical standpoint. There's no and I think that's why it resonated with so many people. We could talk about the business for days, it seems, but it is the one company out there really trying to become that global streamer for sports.
Yeah, I'll wrap on this point. Is that what I've heard from a couple of people is, I mean, DAZN's still the case that we're all following, particularly in sports media, to see if this journey's been worth the effort, the time, the money, etc., that's been put into it. Their platform has been a bit of a Frankenstein of building from the origin days out of a perform business, and they keep adding layer and layer upon layer and adding all these new features to it. And it's been impressive that they've been able to do what they want to do. I feel like the Game Pass experience I've had is good, but there's a few little things there that are make it a bit rough around the edges. For example, whenever I'm watching their content on my phone, if the screen goes blank, it goes back to the start of every video every time. There's little types of things like that are just nuanced. They're minor, but you don't see that from some of the real bigger players. The general access to what features you have, it's there, but it feels like the refinement needs a little bit more polish. But when you're moving at 1 million miles an hour like they have, 95% versus 100% in terms of standards probably sufficient, which they may or may not like me saying. The other bit is they have to work out how to drive more value and return out of the other mediums and revenue streams. And I have heard and speculated that this whole free-to-air model where they did with the Club World Cup is how difficult has it been to shift people from a free user to a paid one. And speculation I've heard is that it's been harder than they expected to do so, which I think it's always harder than anyone ever expects to turn a free user into a paid one. But those are lots of obstacles along the way that they've got to address. But ultimately, if they can turn the business into a profitable one and someone's willing to pay the check that they need to, then it was all worth it. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with DAZN from here. I'm conscious of time, so I want to wrap up shortly. Quick one I want to touch on is that you spoke to BBC Sports, the director of BBC Sport, Alex K. Jelski, on stage at the Media Summit. Just wondering if you had anything that really stood out from that conversation, or indeed if there's anything else that jumped out to you, any surprises perhaps you heard on the ground at the Madrid event.
Yeah, so I spoke to Alex, who's now been in the job, I think, for 18 months. I think we got the exact date on stage, and as I said during our conversation, like most British people, I have a pretty special relationship with the BBC. It's been with me for literally my entire life. It's something that it's been my browser homepage for 20 plus years. So I think that means although you value it you also feel like you own it because you pay for it. It's a public institution, so I think lots of people have got opinions on it. And I certainly did, although generally quite I guess I have a positive view of the organisation in the grand scheme of things. And Alex was just discussing some of his changes since he joined the organisation. So things like the digital output in terms of rights, in terms of how it positions football coverage, how it positions women's sports. So it's a combination, I guess, of practical or strategic changes made with more philosophical ones. which is, there's nothing else like the BBC in the world. There are similar public service organisations. So it really doesn't feel like there's anything that carries that national significance, even international significance, in terms of, you look at the levels of trust that people have in the BBC, even outside the UK, it's extremely high. And of course, it's battling with changing, the changing media world. It's got I don't mind saying, and if BBC want to do this, they can do it fun. I pay double the license fee for what they give me. I think it's a really great offer in terms of what they do, but it is quite an archaic mechanism of collecting that fee, and I don't, and it is meant to be free of political input, and it is. But in terms of how it's funded, is never becomes a political discussion, and what it means is now it's having to contend with either static or less funding in real terms. And so there's always the point I'm trying to make is it's always going to have to make these decisions, these trade-offs in terms of what it does and who it serves, because it's got to serve multiple audiences. It's got to bring big events to large audiences, and it's got to serve small events to relatively underserved audiences. It's also got editorial decisions to make. I don't know, when what's happening in the UK now in terms of the BBC, has been front page news. So it was really good to just discuss, and we didn't discuss the latter bit, just for the record. We discussed purely sport. It was interesting to hear his standpoint, where he thinks the BBC and public service sports broadcasting is going in the future. And just, I guess the final thing I'd say is he's a relative outside the organisation. He's gone from print with the Times and the Mail. He then launched the Athletic in the UK, and he's now running the BBC Sports. So, yeah, I think it was a fascinating discussion. I'll be doing something for the site on it soon as well. One of the most interesting conversations I think I've ever had from one of our events.
Yeah, I had a great conversation with him off stage, and I just felt that, he jumping from the Athletic, an environment like the Athletic, which is, we followed that journey pretty closely too, to the BBC is about as big a jump as you could possibly imagine in terms of culture. This fast-paced startup subscription-led environment to the model that is the BBC is just quite a culture shock for many. So for fair play to him to be able to lead and evolve to that environment, because that must be a bit of a shift.
Right.
Just a final question really for the event, and let's definitely keep an eye out for those listening on that piece around Alex and the BBC that Steve's going to be producing. But any other major just quick things that jump to mind that you heard on the ground there, either from Alex or just from other conversations that was interesting to you from the Media Summit?
I mean, in addition to the stuff in the corridors about the Champions League rights deal, which turned out to be useless. I think the one thing for me is, even if we don't mention AI all the time, it's at the back of everyone's mind. It's now finding its way into other conversations in terms of practical applications. I think most people at the event are quite pragmatic about it. They sense the opportunity, but they don't see the need to be doing it for the sake of it, and they're eager to learn. I think I said something similar last year. I think it's less of a mystery this time. I think people have another year to get to grips with what it can and can't do, or where it's going to be in a couple of years. One thing I've learned is, that everyone's trying to find ways to make things more efficient. That seems to be just a real. I was a bit surprised that we're still trying to find those efficiencies. So that was something. I think it's just the diversity of monetization, I think, is the other thing. I think that's now increasing in people's minds as we've gone to this next level of streaming. We're now no longer making that distinction between linear and streaming in terms of distribution. It's now a case of, how do you capture all that audience? How do you monetize them effectively? How do you get that right media mix? Those were themes that stood out for me. I don't know if you had any final thoughts, Nick.
I actually posted something online with 13 things I picked up across the event, and I missed loads of content. So I'm actually really aware that I didn't get close to all the action because I was bouncing around all over the place doing content and backstage stuff. But so have a look at that for those that are listening in if you want to get a bit of an insight. On the AI point, I think it's a great one. I think the dynamic, the mindset, the culture, the progression around AI is incredible in 12 months. It is absolutely focused on efficiencies, not revenue generation really. It's about how to make your organizations more effective. Doubling your amount of content was the message coming out of like TikTok and Two Circles and others on the ground. But it's using the technology to make that happen, not saying you have to throw loads more people into that to bring it to life. And AI is rampant across every aspect of the sports media ecosystem. And everyone seems to be pretty like aware of its opportunity, its value, and are all leaning into it very closely. And I think with that, it's created a mindset shift across the whole entire industry of like, we need to keep innovating. Otherwise, we're going to fall behind. And AI, we have confidence in AI can get us there, which I thought was just a nice sort of feeling, whether it is all AI or bust. But, I think it just feels like that's led to a culture shift.
Just one final thought on that. Again, I think people are much more comfortable talking about it. So if you're looking at AI generated content, lots of people are willing to say, we know it's not as good as in some instances as human created content. At least in some instances, but it's better than nothing. So things like real time translation. And then the other thing is that audiences are becoming more comfortable with the idea of it now that they see that it's not just it's not slop and AI slop in all cases, or it is a case of making things accessible. It's about using it right. It's about understanding what it should be used for and what it shouldn't. And I think that's healthy for the industry.
Yeah, definitely. Look, that puts us up well for the second part of this episode, which is an interview I did on the ground with the team and the VP of product strategy at Dolby, Paul Boustead, who gave a bit of an insight into what Dolby's seeing and doing around the sports media space to both help on the strategic, the monetization, and indeed the technological side, which I found really interesting. And also a little bit of insight from what he had heard through conversations he'd had on stage with Barcelona and the ATP. So I'm going to hand things over to me, talking to Paul Boustead from Dolby, and look forward to catching up with you again, Steve, very, very soon.
Thank you, Nick.
So, Paul, you're fresh off stage at the SportsPro Media Summit today, and obviously when I hear the name Dolby, I actually have a bit of a flashback. So when I was in my late teens, I was working in projection in the cinemas, and when we would have to deal with what was on screen, we'd also have to do a lot to do with the audio and sound, and we would talk about Dolby incessantly, basically, always delivering great quality sound, of course. But that was what I synonymize Dolby with. You're here talking video and what you're doing in sports. Just what is Dolby doing in this space right now?
Well, I've been in Dolby for 18 years, so I've actually been through a lot of the journey that's got us into video and actually getting us into sports now. So we got into video with a product called Dolby Vision, and essentially Dolby Vision enables the creator to have control over how video is displayed on the TV. And essentially the creator can define the colors, and because we know the capability of every TV with Dolby Vision, those colors can be mapped directly across to the TV. So you can get the experience that you want. And this also maps to sports. And Dolby Vision in sports is a really great experience because the team colors come across correctly, which the teams really love. Plus also, when you look at the faces of the players, they look natural. Whereas if you use some other technologies, they may come across very differently on every TV that you look at it, based upon what TV styles, settings you've got. So this move into video has been great, and it's very important for sports, we believe.
It's funny you talk about those sorts of things. I think everyone would take that for granted, how important some of those factors have been. When you've been talking to broadcasters, streamers, and sports, what's been their understanding of that as an important factor?
Well, so we're getting Dolby Vision in more and more sports experiences as we go forward. So it's been quite successful in that regard. But as a company, Dolby's an experience company. So we think more than just the video experience. And sports is really a great example of this because sports, it's a story as well. So it's a story of the sport, the game you're watching, but there's also a lot of context around the sport as well. So we are looking at how we can get involved in this longer term. And we're starting actually where our customers care. So with the Dolby OptiView products that we're talking a lot about here, we're looking at how we can help our customers tell the story, but also monetize. So earn revenue, which is really important these days with sports.
It sure is. It's the name of the game in the sports industry. That is for sure. So you've been on stage just come fresh off the stage, and you're with the ATP and FC Barcelona, talking a lot about that very fact, the coexistence of content creation and monetization. Talk us through this. What were some of the conversation that you had on stage and any key learnings?
So we talked a lot about personalized ads and how important they are for sports. And the reason they're important for sports is actually people prefer an ad if it's relevant to them. And so
it's funny you said that, because that seemed revelationary for some people, and it's like,
that's right.
Absolutely, how is that not something that people are taking into account now? But it is such an important part of the piece of the puzzle.
Right. And it's more valuable to the advertisers if they can advertise to a segment of users that they want to advertise to. It is really important. And what we talked about there, we've just done a really interesting survey with Dan Rayburn. So we surveyed a lot of sports streaming organizations.
I must say, a previous guest of the StreamTime Sports podcast.
Excellent. It was a really interesting survey because what we found was that only 10% of sports streaming services are effectively doing personalized ads through dynamic ad insertion. And we also explored the problems around it, which are related to sports itself. Sports is very different to video on demand, where personalized ads are very common. Within sports, it's a much more complex problem because you have many people needing to get served an ad at one time. And it's also, you've got to get all these ads ready to fill your inventory in a very short time, because the delay of transmission is quite low. So which is becoming more and more important in sports. So it's a much harder problem, and to get the video quality right and to get everything done in time. So it's a place for needs a lot of work to get us there at the moment.
We talked about this earlier on stage. I did a presentation and I mentioned a little bit about ads there as well. And people sometimes, I think, in sports who aren't from a media background kind of don't really get it. They don't really understand the importance of all this. But obviously, if you get it right with relevancy and you get it right with delivering those ads to people that are much better experience than the randomness that might come from the internet if you go searching online today, the value of those ads goes up so much so that there's a viability that the role of advertising can be such a viable part of monetization, or that monetization mix. What did you hear from some of your panelists as well, from whether it be from ATP or FC Barcelona around that?
Yeah, so we talked a lot about the different ad experiences in the panel. And the nice thing is, because we're doing over the top is becoming very common in sports, you can do different ad experiences. And because we're personalizing ads as well, you can personalize the delivery of the ad. So within the Dolby OptiView product, we're looking at a lot with double box ads, L-bar ads, and also overlay ads. And the nice thing you can do with this experience is, if you know about the what's in the content, as well as what's interesting to the viewer and interesting to the advertiser, you can optimize for that. And I really like the idea of actually having ads being played which are non-obtrusive. Mm-hmm. And you could imagine an ad being played when the goal is scored in a game, but the ad is just an overlay on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. And so the viewer watching, who is really engaged in the game, sees the ad in the bottom right-hand corner, doesn't disturb from the game, but it's really valuable for advertisers that are trying to grow their brand and associate it with great moments. So I think you can use a lot of data to improve the ad experience and generate more revenue.
And this is such an important point, because for the main reasons, and one of the things we're seeing across media rights generally, is a flatlining of revenue from media rights, particularly for those sports that aren't really, let's say, ad-centric. So that's why America, you see the NFL, the NBA do so well. There's lots of stop-starts. They have abilities to serve ads in a very seamless fashion relative to the gameplay. But with football or soccer, they really have a challenge with that, because it's actually rules and regulations that stop that. However, the grey area, I believe, is around more overlay style advertising, where I think that if they can unlock that and maybe FIFA can relax a little bit about some of those limitations, which I did think in the Club World Cup I started to see more of that come to life. Yeah. That could be a nice little boost for media rights revenues that have really struggled to keep momentum over the last few years. Would you agree with that sort of sentiment?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's I think there's a lot of space for innovation in how ads can be portrayed, and I think there's got to be work on the content licenses agreeing with those types of ads, plus also the ad industry being able to sell new types of ads. But when they get more and more personalized based upon what's in the content, what the viewer's interested in, and what the advertiser's interested in, I think it's going to happen.
So anything else you took from the panel, especially maybe from ATP side, that you thought was relevant and worth sharing?
I really like one of the comments from the ATP team. They're not very advertising centric. No. They're trying to create experiences that engage their viewers. And one of the experiences that Andrew talked about that he really likes is absolutely no commentary, just what the audio you get in the stadium streamed with the video. And that's an engaging experience to some people. But it really brings up the point that different people like to enjoy sports in different ways. And I thought that's really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of, was there anything that you disagreed on? Or was it all harmonious in that basically advertising needs to be better integrated to the experience?
I don't think there was any disagreement, Erish. It was a really engaging conversation.
So talk to me, sports is on this journey around advertising integration into sports streaming. Where do you see it being now versus, where it should be? How far does it have to go?
So I think in terms of new sports experiences, I think advertising is part of it, but monetizing experience through subscriptions is also very key. It's really important to Andrew from the ATP. And I think there's a lot of interesting work that can get done there. And what I believe, and this really riffs off what Andrew was saying, what I believe is that personalized streaming experiences are also important. So if you can personalize a sports streaming experience based upon what the viewer wants to see, I think it's a really compelling thing. And if you think about broadcast sports, you have a commentator who is there trying to engage the viewer throughout the whole game, and he'll talk about engaging things that are happening when goals are about to be scored, but he'll also talk about player histories and talk about other games when there's lulls in the action. But this is an experience which is general for everyone. I think there's room to make experiences that are personalized to a viewer, and with all the data available now about how people are engaging with platforms and AI, I think there is a really interesting path where we can create personalized experiences for viewers. And I think that's going to increase revenue because it's going to keep people watching and they're more likely to resubscribe.
So back to OptiView for a second, just talk a bit of nuts and bolts here. What exactly not only are you offering or doing, but who are you putting that sort of capability in the hands of? Is it the broadcasters and platforms? Is the people basically with the rights themselves who are trying to manage all that? And what is it that they're getting access to?
So we're working mostly with people, obviously, that have to own the rights. And we're working with large direct-to-consumer sports organizations. That's one of our sweet spots at the moment. And the products that we have are, number one, a streaming player, a player which is trusted by a number of large streaming organizations and sports organizations. And there we solve the cross-platform problem. If you're releasing a streaming service, you've got to work across a lot of smart TVs, connected TVs, browsers and phones. So we solve that device problem. We also have a streaming product. And the streaming product, what we're aiming to do is to have low and consistently low delays. And the reason we're doing that is actually what's happening in the industry at the moment, what's happening with sports is people are actually watching together via social media. So there's a demand to get the delay low, plus also consistently low so people can watch together. And so we have customers that are trying to get to broadcast delays, but then people want to go significantly below broadcast delays, closer to live. So
people are so greedy, aren't they?
That's right.
Yeah, gosh, always wanting more. But when you're talking about that desire for like latency to be squeezed so tight, betting's always the reason that's being raised primarily. Just talk about what are some of those other benefits. You talked about the watch along aspect of it.
So we have customers that are looking at betting as the reason, and they want delays in the 1 to 2 seconds. That the lower the better in many cases. For sports streaming experiences, generally our customers are wanting below 5 seconds. That's from production to viewing. Obviously, there is additional delay in the production process in many cases, and the main goal there is to keep the delay low enough so that people aren't that the experience isn't spoiled by social media. The quickest way to spoil an experience is knowing the goal is going to happen before it happens. So if we get the delays down low, people don't have to choose to turn their phones off, which is a hard choice for people to make these days.
Well, we had a study on the presentation I shared earlier. Something like 93% of people watch live sport with a phone in hand, which I think says it all, really. That you can't expect people just to be turning it off and putting it on silent in the corner and hoping that it's going to go away. Interesting. So in terms of then talking about what we just talked about then and talk about the second screen component of it, talk about, we have this conversation constantly about lean in versus lean back experiences that are being served from sports. Do you see one really standing out, or is there one basically standing out for customers and consumers that they're really interested in?
Before I answer that, I should just finish the product list of products.
Yes, go for it.
We also have an ad product. We're doing a server-guided ad insertion product, and our goal there is to address the needs of sports. And it's actually quite complex to get dynamic ad insertion, personalized ads going effectively in sports because of the delay involved. We're working on an ad insertion product specifically for sports.
Interesting. Okay, and that's to address that problem with the challenge of the DAI.
Yeah, that's right.
Because I have heard that constantly. People talking about they say you just can't do it. But you guys are going to solve that problem.
That's right. So we're kind of trying to increase that number from 10% of sports streamers using it. It's really the big guys that are doing it. We're trying to enable others to do it, like the direct-to-consumer sports organizations.
So let's talk then about the lean in versus lean back. Where do you see how do fans want to consume? Is it more one way or the other, or is it a bit of a mix?
I think people want a mix. If you look at experiences out there now, like watching NFL on Twitch versus Prime, there's lean in and lean out experiences there. I think the key here is to provide experiences that are personalized to the viewer and not expect them to lean in, provide them with basic knowledge of what they're interested in, actually feed them things, but enable them to lean in if they want to. So I think the key is personalization.
So from here, Dolby's making its moves into sports. You're innovating on the product side. What's your main goals in terms of within the sports space? Where do you kind of see where you want to get to?
What we're really trying to do in sports is to enable our customers to create engaging, personalized sports experiences that they can monetize. So we're looking at what other products we can build to help them along that path.
And with the journey that sports is going through with regards to leaning into advertising more closely, it's a pretty good time to be doing it.
Yeah, it's a super interesting time.
Look, that is all we've got time for, but a big thank you, Paul, for joining us today.
Okay, thank you.